Hi guys. So this product I'm going to show you now, observation criteria, was something we developed for tandem examiners, and we felt it was valuable for tandem instructors as well. So observation criteria, the action or process of observing someone or something in order to gain information. There's 10 areas of a tandem operation that I'm going to be looking at through here. I'm not going to, the other 10 areas, I'm not going to read them off now because we're going to go through them all as well. But the first one I'm looking at is equipment observations. So if we look at equipment observations, and in the previous talk, there's a lot of talk about what's happening in our sport, right, in tandem jumping, when we're talking about all the statistics of these heavier people. This is a fact of life now, that in general the population, especially in the US, and I think so it's the same here in the UK, is that people are getting heavier, and it's a real thing. So we looked at, when we designed the tandem system, we look at all of these things, and we have addressed them to some degree. Somebody says, why don't the manufacturers address it? We have. So we have two sizes containers right now, and hopefully in the future we're going to have a third size out there. But if you had a tandem operation with multiple equipment, multiple different types of equipment besides ours, we have the Sigma and the Micro Sigma. It's very important to look at who you're going to be jumping with and who you are as yourself, and decide what system I'm going to use. If I'm a 200-pound, I'm 6 foot, I'm just over 200 pounds now, my wife's looking at me. And I have a 200-pound student. Am I going to take the Micro Sigma or the Sigma? It's really important to decide what you're doing, what you want the outcome to be, and choose the correct equipment for you. If I've got a student that's, or if I'm a shorter person, should I be jumping the Sigma when there's a tall 200-pound tandem master on the same load as me jumping a bigger person? You know, decide what equipment you want to use for where you are and what area you're in. Early on, we spoke about the fatality out at the Grand Canyon. That guy was jumping a Micro Sigma at a drop zone at an elevation of 5,000 feet above sea level in summer at the Grand Canyon at 120 degrees. His outcome of that jump, besides his lack of experience, it was all leading up to that this was not going to be a successful outcome at the end of the day. Okay, let's look at the AADs. UPT and other manufacturers approve certain AADs in the equipment. For UPT, the Cypress 2 now, Cypress 1 should be expired. If you see them, they shouldn't be jumped. All the visual product ranges. The Mars M2 system is approved as well. None of the others. The Argus, I know some of them are still in use, are not approved in our containers. Now, whether your federation allows you to use that, no. Okay, so also with the AADs, I think most AADs on the market now are multi-mode. Make sure it's in tandem mode. Why should it be in tandem mode? Well, the opening altitude's a lot higher. If it's in student mode, we've had a case where somebody had a tandem on student mode and that AAD fired under canopy because he'll exceed the speed. Okay, packing styles. Packing is important. So when we're looking at packing, now you guys don't always see who packs their own tandem rigs when they jump here. So there's quite a few of you. So the manufacturers put out there, whether you're jumping a Sigma main canopy or a Icarus main canopy, or you're jumping a Sigma with Dacron lines as opposed to the Vectran line, there are different criteria, different rubber bands that you should be using, how much bite you have, how much of the line you put into the rubber keepers, how big is that bite? You know, if you're using Dacron lines, you need at least a fifth size of bite outside of the rubber bands. With the Vectran lines, a little bit less, and you need to double sew them with standard bands. How you put the bag in the container is also important on the outcome of the jump. Our bag is designed to lay flat and rotate out as it deploys. I see a lot of times people put that bag in and they just squish it straight down. That puts an enormous amount of strain on the attachment loop on the top of the bag, and eventually that will lead to failure. That fails, you lose your drogue, and your DZO is really pissed off with you because they're expensive, which will keep our kids in college. So lose some drogues if you want to. Yeah. Student harness compatibility. Just because a harness has the same or similar type of hardware to connect to our system, our Tandem student harness is designed to work with our Tandem containers. Now, if you look at the Strong, they look very similar, but the Strong is a much longer container, so you'll know that the attachment point, the side attachment point is a lot higher to accommodate for that longer container. So even though they might look like they're compatible, they are not always cross-compatible. And it might not be obvious till you're in the air and you feel things don't feel right because your student's hanging incorrectly. So it is important that you have the right student harness with the right container. Somebody also mentioned earlier on about these heavy people. I see there's some guys here with gray hair, so a lot of you guys might have jumped the old vet harness. We found out and I'm trying to think, it was around about 2000, that as the population was getting heavier, that those harnesses were not suitable for the people we are taking anymore. People were passing out, people were getting sick. So we actually went to a doctor, and we said, how can we avoid this? So we designed our harness with this heavier population in mind. We moved the attachment point from the back, like from the back where our old harness used to attach. Now we hang the passenger from the front. That allows him to sit easier in the harness. I will go back into harness a little later. I'll discuss more on harness fitting. So so if you at a drop zone that has some Sigmas, some Necks, some Strongs, or whatever, don't need to change those harnesses. They're designed to work with the system. Oh, I've gone too far now. Okay, closed-toe shoes. Why do we not jump with Tevas on or sandals or so? We've had one fatality and 2 incidents that were caused directly from open-toe shoes, where the Tandem Instructor, that was the end result. The Tandem Instructor not throwing the drogue when they were stable was the beginning of the problem. So we had the one in Hawaii where the drogue wrapped around the instructor's leg and got hooked between these heel of his Tevas, and he was not able to release it. He spun on his head for a long time, deployed the reserve. They got wrapped up and they went in like that. So there are reasons for it. Even though you might be in a hot climate, you want to wear sandals, there are issues with sandals or shoes with hooks on them, all that kind of stuff. Okay, helmets. Even though UPT does not mandate that the Tandem instructor wear a helmet, it is really a good idea. I think do you guys? You have to wear. So in the US they don't, because people are supposed to be in charge of their own destiny, but it doesn't always work out that well. We have tried to mandate helmets, but they don't want to, for whatever reason, they don't want to mandate it. So the type of helmet you wear is also important, how you communicate with your student. Would I wear a cookie helmet with a dark lens? No, because they can't see my eyes. You want to look at somebody, you want them to be able to see you so you can communicate effectively with them. Goggles, the type of goggles are important. You want to make clear goggles. You want to be able to see what you're doing, where you're going, and again, same for your students, selecting the right type of goggles. Altimeter, we were speaking about, altimeter. We were talking about this guy that did not have his altimeter with him in the plane. Just having an altimeter doesn't make sure it works. A lot of the altimeters now that we have in the market, they rely on batteries. Are your batteries replaced? Is it charged? Whatever. Is it going to work? We always recommend that you have 2 forms of altitude indication. So when we train people, we say it's always a good idea to have an audible as well as a visual altimeter. If one doesn't work, you still have your backup. So that guy didn't have his altimeter with him or altimeter with him. He might have had an audible that would have helped in that situation. Okay, jumpsuit selection. Do I take this little girl and put this big baggy jumpsuit on her while I'm wearing my type 4-way suit? No, that doesn't work. So always make sure that you have the correct selection on jumpsuit. Some drop zones, they don't even put jumpsuits on students. They go in their shorts and T-shirts. Is that really a great idea? No, if you're sliding in a landing, it's normally uncomfortable if the girl's wearing her Daisy Dukes. Okay, main canopies. the trend we see, and we have our Australian compatriot here, we see this trend of tandem canopies getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And it's all great when everything works out, when things work out perfectly. I'm jumping this 288 square foot cross brace tandem canopy. But it's when things go wrong that you on a long spot, or you're in a high altitude with a bigger tandem and no wind conditions. So always select the right canopy for the type of jumping you're doing and your experience level for that matter. I know DZOs sometimes like the smaller canopies, less hang time, more tandems in the air, right? So this trend of tandem canopies is something, and the other thing why this is happening, I think, as well, is because people are gaining a lot more experience. We know that there's people out there with 20, 30,000 tandem jumps now. Shlomo, what's he got? 25,000 tandem jumps. 25,000 tandem jumps. Hank, how many do you have now?
16.
Yeah, so I mean, people are very experienced, but that experience works out great when everything's going right. The equipment you select is there to help you when things don't always go perfectly. Aircraft. Now, I know there's pretty strict rules in this country about aircraft, but I'm sure a lot of you in the winter go work in foreign countries. Always know the aircraft you jump out and find out what are the problems with this aircraft. We had the fatality in Mexico. They had a 182, which everybody jumps a 182, right? It had this step that had a snag on it. This tandem pair went out. As the step wasn't the step that you normally see on a 182, this nice and clear, no sharp corners. It had a sharp corner. The tandem instructor hooked the passenger's leg strap on that step. They were flying around. They couldn't do anything. They couldn't unhook them. Everybody else left the aircraft. Eventually, they were flying down the beach. It was going to land on the beach, and I guess the tandem instructor decided that this wasn't going to work and deployed the main. So they all went down into the ocean. They all drowned or died. They never recovered them. So those things, even though might look on the surface, might look good, always take a little bit of extra time. Look at the people around you, see what they're doing. Let them look at you. You should be your brother's keeper. Now, there was a woman, or your sister's keeper in some cases. Make sure that you see what's going on around you. You can look at the equipment, see if you can find stuff. Now, I know part of your rules here that you have to do an equipment check. I wish we could have something like that in the US to help. That would help us a lot. So, okay, let's go into the other one. So, instructor harness fit. Make sure that the harness does fit. You heard one guy talking, well, I wear this harness and no matter how short I make it, it's still too long. So maybe that's not the equipment you should be using. I mean, he admitted it's not right for me. So in this case, it's the instructor that had his harness was way too long. The tandem is floating right above him. If he wants to get his left side drogue release, he might have a bit of a hassle. So make sure that the harness is fit. The main lift is fitting you right. If the rings are sitting on top of your shoulder, chances are that harness is too long. If you can't arch or you scrunch down, well, the harness is too short. Make sure it fits you correctly and it's symmetrical. Why do we want it symmetrical? That's for heading control, canopy control. If the harness is not symmetrical, we're most probably not going to have a very successful outcome. Student harness fit, okay. The waistband and back strap are designed to fit where a belt would fit you on a pair of pants. So that's the first thing. I don't know if you guys have been onto our website. There's a harness fitting video. It gives you a lot of this information. Make sure that belly band and back strap is about where a belt should be. That's the first thing you should set up. Get that right. This whole issue people having of big people not being able to lift their legs, position the main lift web of the student harness. If a person's really big and out of shape, it's all right to position that main lift web forward of center. So average size person, you want it almost straight down the side. But when you've got these heavy guys, the further forward you move it, the easier it is for them to lift their legs because they're hanging from the front of the harness like you would in a skydiving rig. There is always the We have the butt strap now. Otherwise, I wouldn't be saying this so much. But with the butt strap, it also prevents somebody falling out the back. So the scary part in the beginning was getting it too far forward. Well, we had that big hole you could fall out, and we did lose 2 passengers that way, and almost 2 more. Everybody saw the YouTube videos, right? Okay. If you position this in the correct position, the leg pads are going to fit them nicely. They're going to touch or they're going to overlap. Doesn't matter how small or big the person is. And if they've got really small legs, you can always unthread the leg straps and adjust it smaller. You know how the adjustment works. You should know. Okay, shoulder, the ideal position, and now this is one thing, like everybody says, you should have the hooks directly on top of your shoulder. That works great if you're an average size tandem instructor. But everybody has a different body, like the big guys might need a little bit more room on the top. And the smaller guys need less room. So position those hooks where it's comfortable for you. Under canopy, your passengers hanging in the correct position and are able to lift their legs. You get them too far back, that stops them lifting their legs as well. Okay, diagonals. Where should they, we want to, so if you have the hip strap and the back strap in the right position, you've got the diagonals in the right position. So when you tighten that down, and you know, in the aircraft, that's going to help you make the student arch. If you have them too high up, you'll see any side spin video, there's something common among every side spin video you look, is that you see the student's hips are separating from your hips. So the lower down you can get that diagonal, the better control you have of your student, the less likelihood of a side spin. Okay. It is a chest strap, not a belly band, not a secondary belly band, and the belly band is not a chest strap, so get them positioned there. In that picture there, you're going to see the tall guy, and I see it so many, we go to operations, and the instructors don't want to adjust that chest strap. So they push it down as low as they can go, and they run the whole day like that without adjusting that chest strap at all. That chest strap should be fitting just below the sternum here. That's an ideal position. And the Y strap. We have had another incident where at one drop zone they just let the Y strap hang down at the back, and that snagged in the aircraft. So that Y strap should be snug against the passenger's butt. And obviously you want their harness to be symmetrical. Okay, pre-flight observations on the equipment itself. Reserve halo, what I'm talking about there. These tandem canopies, the tandem reserve canopy is a big canopy, and sometimes it compresses over time. It shifts around in the pack job depending on how much the equipment is used. If you see that halo, and we call it a halo, where you can actually see the top of the spring on the reserve pack job, there's two things. So we know that either the loop is stretched out a bit or the pack job is shifted, but that affects the launch of the pilot chute. If that pilot chute is not compressed all the way, when you need it, it's not going to launch it as far. And the other thing it's going to do is damage the reserve container. If that person leans against something in the aircraft, eventually will start chewing through the cordura. Is the reserve pin, and the reserve pin will be slack. You can lean against the aircraft with the reserve. If you can compress the reserve spring in the pack job, there's no tension on the reserve pin. Disc orientation, I've seen it. We've got an arrow that points which way he's up on the disc. Sometimes I've seen that arrow point down, and now the bridle's all over the place. Yeah, you can pack it like that, and you can close a container like that, but that puts a lot of strain on the system itself. The bridle's twisted, the cordura is very abrasive, so that will start damaging the side flap over time. Exposure of the drogue bridle. So if you see somebody walk into the aircraft and you can see the drogue bridle hanging out of the drogue pouch, that means that drogue is not packed correctly. So you've had some incidents here that I saw of drogue entanglements. If you have that drogue bridle, it's so easy to reach between it and throw the drogue, and you already created a half hitch on the drogue, or the handle snags. I see a lot of tandem instructors as well walk into the aircraft, and just before they get in the aircraft, they grab the drogue and they pull it out about 3 or 4 inches. What does that tell you? That tells you that that tandem instructor doesn't have the confidence that he can operate the equipment correctly. The drogue should be all the way in the pouch with just the handle exposed. Is the drogue properly folded? We have a recommendation that's in our manual, and that's really the only way you should be folding the drogue. I've seen so many variations of, well, I like to do an S-fold in so it keeps it tight, I pull it, it's loose, and whatever. There's a correct way to do it, and that will not expose the handle to getting snagged on the drogue. It will also allow the drogue to get to full extension without the bridle getting out before it should. We discussed symmetrical main lift web on U, and I also discussed the AAD in tandem mode. If you look at the main pack tray and you see that there's lots of wrinkles on it, I know that a container is soft material, and the only thing that gives it its shape and symmetry is what you stuff in it. So if you see a lot of wrinkles on the container, it means that there's something not quite right with that pack job. So have a look. Okay, bungee pin operating, hard pulls. Don't hear too much of it. Since we shortened the pin, I don't know if some of the older tandem instructors will know on the Sigmas, we used to have a much longer pin, but we have a shorter pin now to try avoid that. But the pin orientation can only go one way. If you put it, I've seen packers put it down from the top and expect to have a positive outcome at the end of that jump. One thing with pre-flight observations, we had a fatality in Brazil 2 years ago. All our examiners know about it. This tandem rig went through its regular maintenance cycle, had a reserve pack job. They reconnected the main, and they put 2 rings through the loop. And eventually the guy had a malfunction on the main and could not cut away. We went to people's Facebook pages, the Drop Zones video and photo library gallery on their website, and we saw when the rig was packed. And so this rig had been jumped approximately they could tell from the AAD, about 250 times since its reserve pack job. That rigging error was like that for 250 jumps, looked at by 11 different tandem instructors, each of them doing a pre-flight, because some of the pre-flights were on video, doing a pre-flight of this tandem rig, and they all jumped it that way till it killed one person because he couldn't cut away, and everybody missed it. So when you're looking at this stuff, don't just look at it. You're so used to looking at things. You're used to looking at an AAD. You're used to looking at a 3-ring. Make sure when you're looking at it, you're actually looking for an error, for something that's wrong. Because I don't know how 11 people, 250 odd jumps, managed to miss the very basic rigging error on the main 3-ring, and eventually led to a fatality. Okay, ground offsetting. Properly sized instructor harness, we've discussed that a little bit. Shoulder D-ring location, that's where I said, where do you want this to be? One thing, sometimes I see some instructors just like to have that, their main lift where their harness adjusted is almost as long as it can go, because it's very comfortable to walk around and move around the aircraft like that. The negative aspect of that is not being able to, under CANOPY, you have a malfunction. Where do your cutaway and reserve handles? We discussed it on a previous thing. Your cutaway and reserve handles sit up there. They're very difficult to locate and pull when you're sitting like here. And also, with the main, once you hook your student up, that all goes slack underneath you, and that's when you start getting handles that can rotate underneath the main lift web. Do any of you use that method where you fold the chest strap back through so you just have to pull one thing and it comes loose? I've seen it done so often. You might think it's not important, but that chest strap is part of the system. And when we drop this harness to destruction, some of the tests we do is we load one side with 75% of the load and the other side with the rest of the load, and we drop it repeatedly on a drop tower to see when the harness is going to fail. That chest strap is really important in the success of that harness holding up. If you load one side of the harness with a loose chest strap, all the load is going to sit on that side of the harness. But if you have the chest strap adjusted correctly, at least it's picking up some of the load on the opposite side. And you can think that if you a tandem pair is 500 pounds, and we've recorded up to 12G openings. So a 12G opening of 500 pounds, that's 6,000 pounds. You have 6,000 pounds on one side of the harness. Besides it's going to hurt, things can start breaking. So chest strap is important that it's connected correctly. Excess webbing storage. So what do you do with their main lift whip? I see some people getting in there, they walk to the aircraft, they tighten down their main lift whip. We made it really easy to adjust them, and they just leave those straps hanging loose there. Or when they tighten the laterals after they connect the student, let them hang in there. I've seen it so many times where people go out and said, I pulled that drogue release and I pulled that drogue release, and it wouldn't work. I had to fire the reserve. Go back and you slow down that video. I've seen it so many times where they're pulling on their main lift web or they're pulling on that side connector. I'm trying to rush this I'm trying to do this as quick as I can without rushing it. Okay, what did we miss? As I said, so many people missed that 3-ring incorrectly rigged. Always, if you look at it, go over it again. Look at other people when you walk into the aircraft. I say, look at what their equipment is doing. If something doesn't look right, it probably isn't right. You have so much time on the ground to fix a problem. You have a limited amount of time to fix it in the aircraft. You have no time to fix it once you leave the aircraft. So anything you can do prior to that will ensure a successful outcome at the end of the day. So let's look at the exit. How many people use hand cam now? How many people adjusted the way they exit because they were doing a hand cam? That's a positive response. So many tandem instructors, and especially the earlier guys, watch them when they just started doing hand cams. So many of these people now have become videographers as opposed to tandem instructors. You should not be changing anything in the way you do your tandem jump just because you slap a camera to your hand. Now, the Australians, they developed this for us, so we got them to thank. But that's where it originated, and they were the ones that actually our procedures that we use for hand cam, we got from the Australian Federation, because they saw this all happening in the early days and realized that we have to address this issue. But I see so many drop zones in the US now, they got hand cam, they don't do a proper gear check because they don't want to ruin the video, or they're flying differently. We had the one incident in Poland where the guy's so used to that everything he did, he kept the camera out there, that when he went through his emergency procedures, he did the same thing, left his arm out there and rolled on his back, and then got entangled with the RSL and the reserve bridle. So make sure that when you do use hand cam, you don't change anything. Your primary goal, your primary function is to be a tandem instructor. The video is secondary. Body position. Are you rocking? Are you rolling? Are you in a good arch? A lot of people believe that once they get their drogue out there, it's now time to relax. You should be in a good body position with a good arch throughout the entire free fall and the opening, because that's where if you're in a bad body position during the opening, if you have an issue, that's where you start seeing things escalate. Also on the exit, I do this every time I jump with a new cameraman or unfamiliar drop zone. Where is he going to be on the exit, and where am I going to be on the exit? I don't care how many thousands or tens of thousands of camera jumps he have. I want to know where he's going to be on the exit. And the other thing, I want to know where he's going to be on opening. So I have a signal. The guy will come, I say, when I do this at 6,000 feet, it means you need to be in front of me where I can see you. And they do that, because I'm going to pull at 55. Drogue throw. Okay, we want to be stable. We want to be stable when we throw your drogue if we can, and we want to know where the relative wind is. I see it a lot that people exit the aircraft and they exit the aircraft and then they want to get stable. With tandem jumping, we got this big weight in front of us. If we just fall out of the aircraft, we create inertia and we have trouble dealing with it. Even very experienced tandem masters, I see so many of them just get to the aircraft, fall out, okay, now I'm going to get stable. If we can exit and put the passenger or the student in the relative wind where we want them to be, it's very easy to get the drogue out. Also, when you see the new instructors, help them with the drogues. I see so many, they pull it out and hold on to it for a second or two, and that's when we start getting drogue entanglements. And check for drogue inflation. So many people will throw their drogue out, oh yeah, it's out there, and they will carry on the skydive with the collapsed drogue. Well, now we've got higher speeds, harder openings, and that can lead to injuries and broken equipment. Handle checks, according to UPT, and I don't know if it is here, is a must. When you do the handle check, is this a handle check? No, it's not. You do the handle check in the order you're going to pull them with the correct technique, because that's what you get used to doing. And you know your handles are there at the beginning of the skydive as well. I like looking up at the horizon. I like to keep my arms neutral out the way of my passenger, and I like to keep a good arch. All those things lead to an easy job. It's easier for you to fly that way than to try to fight your passengers the whole way. I've seen so many times where we've got a very good video we showed during our tandem examiner course, where the student is in a really good body position, but the student's a lot bigger than the tandem instructor that was jumping with them. The student's got a perfect arch because the tandem master has got his knees down and his arms in and they're rocking. He's punching this guy to get him into a good arch. He was really punching him hard, and there was nothing wrong. It was he was doing this to himself and blaming his student. Okay, canopy flight. Everything when you do when we do our controllability check, that's the first thing we want to do. This instructor that saw the link sideways that you were talking about earlier, that's really good because most people would not have seen that. So always have a method that you use to check every aspect of the canopy before you start getting your student comfortable. So have a look up. We know we have to do a controllability check. But before we do that, have a look. Is my slider down? If you're jumping a Sigma, collapse your slider because that will save the lines. That way you got a good view of the canopy. Is the drogue entangled with my lines? Have something that you do on every jump that you can check all aspects of that. The canopy's fine. Am I fine? Are my handles in place? Are the yellow cables, are my 3 rings still connected correctly? Are my handles in place? The student's looking good, they comfortable? I'll do my controllability check. Okay, this is all good. Now I can disconnect the side connectors and reconnect them. We spoke about the fatality in Mexico and that's not the first time that a steering line has got caught in the quick ejectors. And because they're quick ejectors, they rely on you take the pressure off them before you can release them. And we've had so many incidents where people have hooked those quick ejectors, and you don't think it's going to happen until it happens to you. You want to do all of this above. We have you see above 3,000 and 3,500 because UPT has a criteria and USPA has their own criteria. So for USPA say 3,000 feet, we say 3,500 feet. You want to make sure that that your canopy is flyable and landable at that altitude. Sorry. Want to also mention an incident that happened not the last year where a tandem instructor opened up. He saw that there was a split down the center of the canopy. There was a hole in the canopy. He did a controllability check and he said, well, this is fine. This canopy, I can do my controllability check, therefore I can land it. Till he actually flared and he landed and he broke the coccyx of his passenger because there was just no lift in it. So just because it can do a controllability check doesn't mean it's a landable canopy. Practice your landing high up so your student knows what to expect and you know what to expect of your student. I used to do sort of a practice landing in my early days of tandem. I had this football player that was 270 pounds with me. And I said, this guy's going to help me. So I sort of practiced it a bit. I was coming into landing, and I said, okay, I wanted to generate a little speed, so I pulled down a bit, and I said, just hold it there. When I say hands up, get your hands all the way up. And when I said hands up, there was no hands up. This guy was 270 pounds and all muscle. So when it came time, and when I said, okay, flare first, too late, we're not getting our hands up. When I said flare, he stuck his hand straight up and we hit the ground. That's the only time I hurt myself in tank. He was okay. He landed hard. I flipped out over the top of him and I twisted my spine, and I was in bed for a week after that. So make sure you know what you're going to do and your student and the expectations from your student. Okay. I see a lot of the time. So I hear a lot that you do a lot of sliding landings here. A big mistake I see in sliding landings is that people will come in and they'll start doing this to try time it to get their slide just right. And I've seen a lot of times as they're hitting the ground, they're letting those toggles up. Not letting them go, letting them up. Well, now you're taking all the lift and all the stopping power away from the canopy. So determine where your flare height's going to be, how you're going to flare high up, and don't try to do this kind of thing. And when you flare all the way if you're going to stand up. Do I disconnect the RSL, and where do I disconnect it? What are the regulations here for disconnecting the RSL for high winds?
And the canopy?
Yeah.
Is instructor's discretion.
Instructor's discretion. I think this should be done just before you start in your approach to landing. Why? Because you can have a wrap up there, you can get caught up, and that RSL, especially in a high stress situation with the skyhook, if you have a skyhook, definitely helps out. So the last possible minute, 1,000 feet, you're going to start your downwind leg. Have a predictable and an identifiable approach. We saw early on the guy landing on top of another guy. That's just lack of communication before the jump, or lack of a procedure. If you want to fly around on the canopy, do spirals or something, do them high and far away. Once you come into the landing area, well, you want to make sure that you have a predictable pattern that somebody can recognize. A downwind, a base, and a final. Coming straight over the top and doing a 180 turn is not predictable, and you lose sight of where you're going and what you're doing. Work on your accuracy. To me, one of the things I do when I do tandem, I always want to land in the pea gravel pit. I want to land there because it's softer, and I can stop even in low wind conditions. So I always practice my accuracy. To me, every time I'm doing a tandem jump, I'm doing an accuracy jump as well. Okay, I got through that in 45 minutes. I thought that was pretty good. It's normally an hour. Does anybody have any questions? It might be regarding this or anything regarding our equipment. So I told you everything you need to know. Perfect. Thank you.